You are listening to an MLGA Network podcast.
All right, so first things first. Am I being detained?
No.
Okay, well that was easy enough. I feel great now.
Welcome to Voluntary Vixens, where Jesse and Maddie give a female voice to news and pop culture with a libertarian twist. Join us to stay informed and challenged while keeping it sane, peaceful, and most importantly, voluntary.
Well, welcome back to Voluntary Vixens. We have royalty in the house with us tonight.
Queen of the memes.
Yep.
The Empress herself.
Hello.
You've seen her, hopefully, on Instagram at Empress of Meme. She pops up on our story sometimes if you follow us there. She's got I can't wait to pick your brain a little bit. Like, where do you come up with some of this stuff?
Like the memes or?
Yeah. Well, I guess okay, so you want to go ahead and sort of introduce yourself a little and what you do and just, I don't know how you got started, how long you've been slaying memes.
Well, I'm Empress of Meme. I post meme templates and for people to make memes, and sometimes I make memes and I complain about the police a lot. I didn't really start even making memes or even really know how until this past December, just about a year ago. I would make them and send them to Sal the Agorist, and we would talk about them and all kinds of stuff, and he's always pushing me to make an account. And finally we had a couple of meme templates that we made go viral, and I was like, okay, I guess I could do that and then just post them. I didn't really think my account would go very far, but I was wrong. Apparently people like meme templates.
Yes.
I'd say
the memes I first started making were very they were just for one group chat, very specific to my friends, and then eventually I moved on to more political memes.
Okay.
I'm a big fan of all.
Yeah,
I think it's funny. Shout out to Adam Graham from our MLGA group, but he's one of our online friends that we've never met in real life. But actually, he's not too far away from you, Jesse. But I think it was him, and he was talking about, and we troll him for it now all the time, but he was like, I don't really understand this internet culture. And I'm probably misquoting him, but I think, and I'll totally speak for myself here, but I think one of the only things that kept me sane throughout the past few years has been memes and good humor on the internet, because Lord knows everybody's on TV screaming in the streets, screaming, and not even, not even for things that we'd maybe want or advocate for them to scream about, let's pay attention to big picture things, but thank God for memes.
Absolutely. They change the narratives, and I just love them. They recruit a lot of people too. A lot of people, when I used to be more active on Twitter, I did a poll. I asked people why they're libertarian, and the fourth or fifth most common answer was memes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Well, it was Ron Paul, Dave Smith, their first paycheck, and memes.
Yeah, no, that sounds like a really good top 4.
Yeah. Oh, and Tom Woods was I think number 5.
That's probably the only thing missing from that top 5.
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty cool.
I think that is pretty cool. I think it's pretty neat how, I don't know, it's just really cool how you can take a visual and get something across to people in just a picture and just a few words, but it can be something very powerful.
Oh, it's wonderful. Murray Rothbard, he wrote books, and then Tom Woods, he does podcasts talking about Murray Rothbard's books. It's and then the next generation, we put 5 words on a picture, and it summarizes everything in a chapter of one of those books. It's amazing.
That's a really good way to think about it. And yeah. So, okay, that makes me think about a few things, I guess. So, like, who are your kind of, who was your gateway drug? Who was your, like, look here behind the curtain?
First, like, I don't know if you guys remember in 2011, like, Kelly Thomas being murdered by police. And
it's gonna be bad that I don't remember this.
It was just in California, and like 6 cops just like beat him to death, and like the whole time he's like crying for his dad. Like,
Jesus.
I was like kind of apolitical at that time, just like homeless, I guess. And when that happened, it was like really sad. It like shook my world. So I got on Twitter and I kind of searched for people who were talking about it. Some of them were liberals and most of them were libertarians. And one day I can't remember exactly what I tweeted, but I said the words "our government," and in typical libertarian fashion, somebody like reached out and they were like, "It's not our government." And he eventually suggested that I look up Ron Paul and listen to him in the debates. So I looked him up and I just saw some of his replies in the debates, and I just thought, man, this guy's amazing, and started just reading, you know, like everybody does, watching all of his videos, reading all of his books, and just completely obsessing about him. And then from there, it was like Lysander Spooner, and then just various works on Mises.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same story for everybody, probably like around my age.
Yeah, you and I might be around the same age. I graduated high school 2008.
Same.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, we are the same age. Then, yeah. So, back in 2011, I've always been registered independent, but I was definitely more Republican leaning. But, of course, that's kind of just, I knew the left was wrong. And then now I've come to figure out and see why and how bad the right is on their issues. And so I think, like, one of your bigger issues, like, is police brutality. And your profile says you're a prison abolitionist, which I've actually never seen written out anywhere else by anyone else. And so I kind of want to talk to you about that too.
Perfect. That was
bingo.
Yeah. I guess it was kind of just like the same with libertarianism to just becoming like anarchists. You start to like, oh, well, we should, you know, reform this and fix that. And then you're like, well, no, because it's been tried before. So it's like not going to work with government. It's basically the same thing applied to the prison system. Like the history of prisons is like the history of reform. So like the very first prison was actually built as a reform to like corporal punishment and capital punishment. So they built it. It was not great. The people it was Quakers that had like the idea, and they immediately were like, this isn't great. This is not a good idea. You know, it's making people worse. And they've been reforming prisons ever since, to the tune of now it's like 2.3 million people incarcerated.
Yeah. Doesn't really sound like reformation.
No,
not at all.
I'm actually in the process of trying to listen to the Michel Foucault's Punishment. I think it's Punishment and Crime or something like that, or Discipline and Punish, I believe. And it's about the prison system, and it's mostly about how over the years, how we've dealt with, you know, people who we consider deviants, like from thieves to child molesters to murderers. We used to do torture back in medieval times up until, you know, let's see, like the 1800s. And I believe like 1900, I think it was like 1936 maybe, or maybe even earlier than that, was the last time France like guillotined somebody. So we've come a long way in our whole society as far as like how we deal with the deviance of society. But one of the things that I'm still waiting to kind of hear if Michel Foucault is going to talk about this is, you know, how is prison going to change people's behavior for the better? That's been the problem that we've had in society is, you know, we're not seeing a whole lot of reform. Like people are coming out and doing the same things over and over again. So is prison actually doing what its job is?
The goal of the current system is like, it's to break people. And while the state creates and maintains the conditions that keep people on the trajectory to prisons, that's why I think like prison abolition and anarchism and libertarian principles, they all like go pretty hand in hand. I don't think like safety's ever been the goal of the police state, but it's more of like a con meant to protect like interests of power. And it's been proven, I mean, like dozens of studies that prison isn't a deterrent for crime. And if it was, America would be like the safest country in the world. And it's not. We have like a 60% recidivism rate. And I think that's pretty like proof of it. If a company operated on under like those statistics, it would be shut down. It would never last.
Yeah, I wonder, that's kind of what I'm thinking is that the only reason why we keep these prisons in place is because there's people making billions of dollars on it. Because it's not doing the job it's supposed to be doing.
Oh, it's definitely a racket.
And I think we're putting too many people in prison that don't need to be there.
Absolutely. The like what like our current prison system does is like it takes the most hated people, like the people we can all agree, like, you know, I mean, personally, I'm a pacifist, so I don't really agree with it. But people you're like, oh, I hate them. They can die. They could be tortured. I don't really care. They take those people and they create like all these laws and these exceptions, and they deprive them of just rights and their humanity. And then after people are okay with that, they bring in these people who are nothing like that, like nonviolent offenders, like Ross Ulbricht. And they apply those same things to those people.
Mm-hmm. Free Ross.
And that's how we get the system that we have now.
That kind of makes sense. I mean, like, that's how they slip everything past us, you know? Here, look at the shiny object. Like, this is for your safety. We're protecting you from X. In this case, we're protecting you from the murderers, the like, routine thieves. We're protecting you from the rapists. And but also because we kind of give over that freedom for like this really a promise of security that we don't have, and I don't think we've ever had, and it's really like kind of an impossible promise to keep as like an outside source. Like the only real true, I think, means of defense are your own self-defense. And so like it just keeps it's getting out. We outsource that as people, like individuals. We outsource it to this group called the government that says we're going to protect you. We've got it all handled, guys. And but yeah, then you're right. They slip everybody else, people that you wouldn't even expect, and you know, people that could easily be your neighbors, friends, family members, get lumped right in there. And it's not really until that point, until somebody might be personally affected, or somebody like next in line, like very closely related to them. It's like, I mean, this is just how I kind of would see it, is that you don't really understand how oppressive the system is until you see it kind of acting upon somebody who's close to you. Unless you get red pilled in a YouTube video, like watching watching cops beat.
And what's really sad is our culture is so obsessed with like cops and courts and criminalization that even when they're a victim of it, they'll still defend it.
Yeah.
Really, like they could, you know, get out syndrome. 10 years later for adding just a little bit of drugs, and they're like, oh, you know, well, you know, we have to be safe. We can't just let criminals run the streets. And
yeah,
it's wild.
What's a criminal? You know, nowadays to be a criminal takes almost nothing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that's the thing that scares me, is when you start labeling people as a criminal.
Seriously,
well, that could mean that you're just, you know, sharing videos on YouTube and suddenly
eating a sandwich at the Subway. Right.
I mean, it's just anything that's just benign could turn into criminal activity to these people. So there needs to be. That's why I think that we need to just get rid of all of it, because even if we were to scale it back, somebody's going to come in and ruin it for the rest of us again. the moment that it seems like every time I turn around, we have new laws that, put people behind bars. I mean,
it's really sad that like the state has really limited our imaginations when it comes to holding people accountable, like especially
public schools.
Yeah. Oh, the school to prison pipeline is like real.
Yes.
But like especially for like violent crimes. I don't know if you guys know who John Pfaff is, but he has this book, I think it's called Locked In. It was like a big influence in my like beliefs. But he talks about like the 3 pathways out of crime, which are like employment, marriage, and just like age. So like in your 20s, you might get in bar fights and go to jail for 5 years because you accidentally killed the guy that you're fighting with. You're not like a horrible person. You made a mistake. Like you're not a monster, but you're going to be thrown into when you're in your 50s. You're not going to do that. The same, unless, I'm sure some people do, but that's not the rule. But the solution, like through strike laws and throwing people into jail, like it ruins all 3 of those. And not completely, but it definitely, if you have a record, it's harder to get employed. If you're locked up during your prime, it's harder to find a mate, I guess.
That's true.
And those things I think are really important to keep in mind. For like the alternatives, like the guy in the bar fight, maybe he just needs to go to like some mediation or anger management or something like that. He doesn't need to be thrown in jail.
right.
And then like the rest of it should be handled in a civil court.
Yeah.
Like him versus that man's family, like the victim's family.
It doesn't need to lead to jail time.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that we use jail time too much as a deterrent, and it's not really that much of a deterrent.
It's not a deterrent. It's really just like a signing of a check. it's a signing of a blank check. It's just like, all right, yep, this one's going to go in the system. Have at it.
Well, in prison, they don't learn how to be like reformed. They learn how to survive in prison, and oftentimes that means when they're getting out, they've made connections with people they may have never made connections with. Like I guess, for example, my sister, she was really bad on drugs, and she got into a lot of trouble, and she went to girls' school, and she like made some friends, and when she got out, she wanted to do like better. She was going to classes and all this other stuff. But one of the girls that she met in girls' school lived in our town. I mean, she moved hours away to get away from all of that. And that girl connected with her, and they got right back into the same things in like no time. Had she not, she didn't really want probably sobriety at that time, but had that girl not been there, she might have, had she not met her in girls' school,
Yeah.
it may have been a totally different story.
Yeah, that's another thing, is I remember when I was in high school, I hung out with a bunch of the quote unquote bad crowd. And I remember,
You did.
yeah, I know, it's shocking.
What?
But one thing I was always annoyed with is that it would be like, I knew my friends, like their mom and dad would send them off to a boarding school. And I'm like, you're just teaching him how to be smarter. That's all you're doing. He's going to get out, and he's going to be smarter at sneaking around and doing what he wants to do. You're not fixing anything.
Was it like strict parents make for sneaky kids? I guess like the same could be applied to the government.
But what do you think he's going to do when he goes to these group homes? He's going to hang out with a bunch of kids just like him. They're all going to teach each other their tricks, which is what happens.
Every time.
And I can't. And I thought it was funny because I was a teenager, and I was like, yeah, that's pretty cool. I was into that kind of thing. I've always been into the dangerous guys. But, that is just something that I don't understand about prison. It's like you put all these people in the same place, and then you're going to put in somebody like Ross, for example, like you're talking about, in there. And what do you think? You think he's going to learn like the importance of like respecting the state, or you think he's going to learn that the state is really just full of shitty people making shitty laws and putting people behind bars? What do you think?
If you've read some of like his letters, it seems like he's getting closer to prison abolition as well.
Yeah,
Just some of the language in them.
That would probably make sense.
I think that a lot of
is really
prisoners
exciting.
feel that way, actually. You know?
Definitely.
Especially the ones that are in their, like, what kills me to this day is, like, there's still people in California that are behind bars for possession of weed. And why those people were never let go and let to go home and start their lives over, I still don't understand. I mean, we've legalized weed in that whole state, and you still have people behind bars for weed. Why?
Thanks, Kamala Harris.
So I'm always about like trying really, really hard to stay positive. So the one thing about California that you guys might like to hear, there is this organization called Code for America, and they've set up. I'm not tech savvy, so there's probably going to be people out there just hardcore sighing at my explanation. They set up some sort of software or like program to find these people who are in jail for things that are now legal, and the paperwork or something, I guess, might be hard. So they can get out. They just have to file the paperwork. But some of them, they're not that kind of person. They're not going to know the law. So this Code for America, I mean, they have freed thousands of people already, just finding them and helping them and leading them in that direction. So that's like really cool. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's pretty amazing.
That's good.
No, I love hearing that stuff like that, because you're right. I mean, there's a lot of people who are in the system and they're never going to even think about how it is that they would be able to free themselves, even if it was like currently legal what they got in there originally because of. And so, like, that's an amazing gift that makes me really happy.
In Oklahoma, in the spring,
I was just going to ask you this. Go
in
on.
the spring, they changed a law where they changed the amount of marijuana that's criminalized. And so just a bit over 400 people, Oklahoma was like the most carceral state in the nation. And they freed like 400 and some people. And now they dropped their prison, I think, percentage, like 1.7%, which is pretty awesome.
Only 1.7%.
Yeah, it's really depressing.
Like, I'm happy. Like, just, I'll take any percent.
Still.
But good God, that's astounding.
Another, I guess, gut punch. In Florida, I was reading today about how they restored voting rights for felons. And in Florida, 1.3 million people had their voting rights restored.
Wow.
Why is there 1.3 million felons in one state?
Yeah.
It's because they've listed everything as a felony.
Yeah, I was just my jaw hit the floor. I was like, what?
Yeah. I mean, like you were saying, or, how we were talking about earlier, it's like most people will assume that somebody is a felon. Like, it's okay. Well, that's obviously murder in the first degree and they're terrible people. But really, you'd be surprised as to what's an actual felony.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean,
I'm
another prison reform, the mandatory minimums, a lot of times people are only felons because of that.
Jeez. And you're you were saying, that really is life affecting. You can't vote when you're a felon. Depending on the state, I mean, you might not be allowed to own a gun anyway, but I think in most states, if you have any kind of that serious of a criminal record, you can't own a gun, can't legally own a gun.
It's hard to get jobs.
Basically impossible. And then you made a good point. If you're in prison during your prime, you're not going to find your mate. And there's so much goodness that you're going to be able to create together and evil combat together. And if you miss out on that opportunity to meet that person who's for you, what else is there?
I mean, there's already so many men that are in prison that they can't see their kids. They can't be the father figure in their families. And there's so many kids growing up without their dads. So it's just like a cycle, too, because some of these kids will end up having the same problems that their father had, is that, they'll end up making the same mistakes because they never had somebody to show them.
I always think of it kind of almost like blowback, but with our policies here, they they create these like ripples with their policies, and it's not just you can lock a guy up and it doesn't just affect that guy, it affects his family, it affects his community too. Like the upward economic mobility, like ability in their city, I mean, that's all affected too. It's really sad.
No, that's a really good analogy, and the ripple effect is real. And like, you know, in the same when you're thinking about like when a country is at war, think about all that money that is going towards the war effort versus, you know, being spent at home, being invested at home. And so, you know, we're even missing one person. If you really value life, like even that one person being in jail for life or jail period, you're right. It really does affect the community, and that person's missing from what otherwise would have been his life. And, you know, people make mistakes and people intentionally do really evil things. And so, you know, I don't know what I'm trying to say, but, you know, everything does have a reaction.
I can't remember the exact number, but I was talking with my friend Natalie one day, and it was right around the time where in New York, they recently opened they have plans to open 4 new prisons with the promise of closing Rikers. We all know that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
So I was looking for their budget, and I was like, oh my gosh, the Rikers budget is like, it was something huge, like in the billions. And she was like, oh, that's really high. And I was like scrolling further, and I was wrong. And it was like triple that. It was like,
oh my God,
I want to say maybe 800 billion. Like, if you think about that money, like where it could go, it is just outrageous. Like the capital that's just being sucked up by the state.
You know, and it's a wonder that people, like, just the public really is in such a polarized state. People are so anxious and stressed and depressed and, you know, really at each other's throats. And it's like, I think, you know, it becomes a lot more tribal of an environment and of a, you know, atmosphere when certain outside pressures are pushing on us. And I'd say, like, us being sucked dry through our taxes and like going towards enormous sums in these budgets, like that's easily what's happening.
Right.
It's compounded with other things, but that is definitely one of the factors we're being stolen from.
If you've listened, I don't know if you guys listen to the Bob Murphy show, but he did this episode
Love Bob.
I love him so much. There's
him.
this episode he did on how a Rothbardian society would be pacifist. And he was talking about like all the ways that crime would be muted in a stateless society. And it was like, there'd be like no boom bust cycles, you know, like making people poor and all that other stuff. There'd be like no mass disruptions of the family units, removing like one or both parents from the home for like punitive reasons or war. No drug laws, no minimum wage laws, looser restrictions on adoption, which I think if more people could adopt kids and more people like could, here's like the super Rothbardian thing, like sell kids, like if there was a market for that.
This is the future, libertarians won.
I know. And there's like no incentive to have kids you can't afford, and like just all these ways the state contributes to crime. And like I just think about the cost of government, like beyond the national debt. It's just, and I personally, like with absolutely no proof whatsoever, I think that like without the state, that mental illnesses and like psych issues that lead to like poverty and deprivation of all kinds and abuse would drastically be different too. It would just be handled different. I think school is a big part of the problem, like public schools.
Prison. It's really just like mandatory daily child prison.
Seeing all of this just destruction and death, I mean, that can't be great for the human spirit.
No, it really can't.
No.
And I think it's definitely all part of the decay.
It's all by design.
It is. And, or like at worst it is, and at best it's just this incompetence that we, the public, allow to continue. And because I guess, you know, people are afraid that, well, we need the state to keep us safe. Like, there's no other way. Who will build the roads?
It's just a false sense of safety, though, because it's not, like we were just saying, it's not really keeping anybody safe because, I mean, we were just talking earlier about how, well, I don't want to say the company, but there's a company that's come out and they are heavily tied with pedophilia and the elites.
Mm-hmm. Starts with a D.
And if we mention their name, we end up making people mad because there's some of our friends who love that company a lot. But what I don't understand, I guess, is, you feel like you're safe, but there's still people like that are free and they're right there with your kids all the time. And just like...
Yeah, right? Like, I don't think I'm ever going to go to that theme park.
I mean,
I've been there.
I went when I was... I mean, I've been a couple times, but I've even told my husband, I was like, I have no desire to go to Disneyland for multiple reasons.
You said the word!
Cam, just block that out. But yeah.
I think, like, one of the... my knee-jerk reaction when people are like, what about, like, if you want to abolish prisons, what about the rapists and murderers? And, like, my knee-jerk reaction is always like, well, first take away their badges and get them out of Congress.
Yeah.
It's just like...
yeah, right? Why do those ones get away with it?
That's what I don't...
Like, they get a free pass.
That was the next thing I was going to talk about. So I was like, how many times have we heard in the news about a child rapist who gets, like, 4 months and then he's out?
Mm-hmm. There's, like, in this country, there's, like, you get life in prison for building a website, but politicians can lie us into a war that kills thousands of our citizens and millions of citizens in the Middle East. And then we've got, like, 45,000 veterans that have killed themselves in, like, the last 6 years. And there's nobody in jail for that crime, but all these people, like, murder is bad, but here we have, like, leaders in this country who have done way worse.
And are vying for more power all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. While we're on the subject of Congress being full of little diddlers and whatnot, but it's, how many times have we heard about the millions of dollars in settlements that Congress has paid to, like, settle their fees from their sexual harassment lawsuits that they've been entangled in? Are they paying for that? No. We're paying for that. So we pay for people to be professional, monopolized criminals. I hate that. I hate that so much.
I do too. It's infuriating.
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. It's hard to not kind of sometimes be down in the dumps about it when you're like that awake to, like, that's the situation we're actually in. But, if you're stressed, check out our last episode.
Yes.
On stress management.
On a more positive note, I guess, like, if you think of, like, politics as, like, a lagging indicator of what really matters, by the time politicians and the corporate media catch up, the bus is already, like, 100 miles out of town. This last election, these radical prosecutors were, like, and specifically in our friend Kamala Harris's old stomping grounds, the radical prosecutor that was voted in there, his dad is in prison for killing 2 cops, and the person that he won against was endorsed by Kamala, had a ton of institutional report. He ran on a platform, is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Like a platform of, he's not going to prosecute for drugs. He's not going to send people to jail for nonviolent gun crimes. He's not seeking bail for, like, a number of arrests. He's like, again, his dad killed 2 cops and he won. And, like, if you think about in the 90s, if a guy like that would have ran, he would have been laughed out of town. Like, it would have never happened. And not just in California, people like him were voted in, but in very conservative states. So I think despite the mass propaganda that we are just showered with every single day, was, like, another thing I post a lot about.
Yeah, right.
People are starting to, I mean, if you look at, like, go anytime a cop like brags about his drug bust, like go look at the comments, like they just get roasted. And I think that people are starting to, like, it kind of almost made me tear up because I saw this, she was really old and she's like, you know, I've lived with mass incarceration my whole life and I'm ready for this to change. And I just thought, you know, people are starting to see the light. It's slow, but I think we are in this, like, this arc of turning around one of the biggest civil rights abuses in our time.
Yeah.
Civil rights, not like worldwide.
It's good to be positive, and I do feel like there is a mass awakening, and you know it's hitting people with different subject matters first. But I think, like you said before, it's all connected, and it all comes down to the same ideas. So, you know, I will jump on board there and say I think it might be darker before the dawn, but I do think that I think that we can only really go up. I mean, I know things can get a lot worse, but you know, it's still going to have to be an upward climb after that.
I really like, a lot of, like the prison abolitionists that I follow on Twitter, they lean leftist. And I really like that they are constantly calling out like these carceral, this is like what I call them, like carceral woke scolds. Mm-hmm. Like the people who are, oh, you misgendered me, you need to go to jail. Like those types. Yeah. And I really like that they're getting a lot of resistance from people on their side, I guess. Which those kind of people scare me. But
I mean, it's like something that like Scott Horton will say all the time, or maybe it's Tom Woods or both, but like we kind of have to go after our own side, you know, like us as libertarians or voluntarists, we don't really have a side, but you know, we do have a side we might either lean more towards or can, depending on the day or subject, could find their way in either camp, speak each other's language, but we kind of do have to fight our own quote unquote side just to kind of try to straighten them out and like let them see the light in the way that you might be able to expose it to them.
I have seen, like, I guess, a rise in more, like, carceral libertarians, which that just drives me crazy. Like, pro-death penalty or, like, just violent, I guess. But I do like that. Scary. Yeah. I do like, I guess, I don't know, maybe we can call them, like, the upper echelon. Like, Tom Woods and Walter Black and all those people, they're very, like, not that way, and they preach against it, and they have alternatives, and hopefully they will find their way to them and correct themselves, because sometimes I'm just like, you are not representing us very well.
Yeah, I know that for me, I used to lean on the right a lot, and I was definitely more pro death penalty for the longest time, especially for, you know, people that were violent murderers, and that's how I always justified it. Well, we have to kill the murderers, right? But then you realize how often our justice system gets it wrong. And these people are accused of murder and they may not have even committed the crime. So just because they were convicted doesn't mean they're actually guilty.
Yeah, again, it's another place where the state has monopoly on whether this person lives or dies. And we know just how corrupt and incompetent they can be. So it's like, pick your poison. Either way, like they could be putting, and they still have innocent people on death row, like waiting to be killed by the state.
In 8 days, Rodney Reed, he's set to be executed, and the evidence of his innocence is absolutely overwhelming, but it's in the hands of one parole board. Like, they have to be able to decide that. They have a suspect, they have they have like an alibi, and they have all these people who have like confirmed his stories, and he's still on death row.
I signed the petition.
So did I.
I know. And it's like, I feel like that's all I can do sometimes, but 8 days. We should be able to turn this episode around pretty quick, so we should link to that here, because I know like certain petitions getting certain and enough attention, get in front of the right people. And I will say, I do appreciate that it seems like Trump seems reachable to some degree on this topic.
Yeah.
Like, depending on who kind of approaches him, I'll take it for what it's worth, and I think that's huge.
I mean, who would have thought Kim and Kanye would be helping Trump with prison reform, you know?
Seriously.
I was really excited, like, the other day when that guy with the small face, like, I don't remember his name, he, like, tweeted, like, a really pro-Ross thing.
Who's the guy with the small face?
Charlie Kirk.
Yeah, that's him, Charlie Kirk.
Small face. Okay, I got it. I can see that.
He does have a small face.
Memes rule my life.
I know. I think I'm never going to see it otherwise again.
It's so bad.
Well, that's exciting because, like, you know, he's got a big following, big platform, and, you know.
Over 1 million people. I looked. I was like, how many people saw this tweet?
Well, that's good. More of that.
Yeah.
Do we want to say anything further about cops or bitch about that a little bit more?
That's like 5 whole episodes.
Yeah.
I know. I know.
That's like an existential question.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what might be an easier question is, so if people for some reason are living under a Instagram rock and haven't heard of you and don't follow you, they should, but so, like, want to tell everybody where they can find you and your work?
Oh, yeah. You can first find me on Instagram at Empress of Meme, and Twitter has the same handle. I'm less active over there, but I do, like, monologue a lot. And then you can, I just started like on the Emilitia podcast, which is on Spotify and YouTube.
Nice.
Okay.
We will link.
I've been on there like 6 episodes or something.
Honestly, haven't listened to it yet, but definitely want to check it out.
It's fun.
I'm all for it.
I'm sure that we will probably get together to talk about more, because this is an ongoing issue, I think, and it's important to talk about.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Share our podcast if you like it. Follow us on Instagram at Voluntary Vixens. Like Empress, we're less active on Twitter, but we're there. And Jesse's really doing some effort to slay some Twitter nerds.
Yeah.
So at Vixens Voluntary. If you'd like us enough to actually, like, voluntarily give us any of your hard-earned money, unlike the government, we'd love donations. So you can find us on Patreon. It's Vixens_voluntary. You should be able to search and find us. We've got a patron, so somebody's found us despite our inability to concisely talk about how to donate money to us. We're pathetic. All right. Thanks again, Empress, for joining us. Can't wait to see you on the Instagram floor. And in the meantime, hope you and everybody else listening keeps it sane, keeps it peaceful, keeps it voluntary.
Bye.
Ross Ulbricht is serving a double life sentence without parole for all nonviolent charges for creating a website. Please help free this peaceful man. Go to freeross.org and sign and share the petition.